Well, hello everybody. Good afternoon and good morning for some people. Welcome to this first workshop related to auditor training and information sharing with regards to the inclusive carbon standard. Before we do jump into the presentation and materials that we've presented, I thought maybe we'd just take this opportunity to introduce ourselves. It does seem like a small enough group. So I'm going to see if I can stop sharing. And perhaps if we can make a start by I'll introduce some of myself and I can hand over to some of my colleagues as well. And then maybe if each of you on the call would be so kind as to just say who you are, where you're from, and what you expect out of these sessions, and keep it short and simple. So I'm Olivia Tuchten. I'm with Prometheum Carbon. We are one of the founders of the Inclusive Carbon Standard, and I've been helping in the development of the standard itself related to the procedures and processes and principles and guidelines. And very happy to be with you today. My expectation for this workshop is and hope is that there'll be really robust discussions about the principles and processes that we are suggesting, because we really would like to develop a community of users, of interested parties, of whether you're coming from a project developer side or from an auditor side or any other side. We want to know your thoughts. And we're very happy to engage in any discussions that you'd like to have around what we are proposing here. I see I've got various colleagues online. If I can hand over to Philip and Serena, and then maybe we can go Simone and Robert thereafter.
Hello everyone, my name is Philip Goins. I'm part of the Prometheum team. My role in relation to the ICS is I've been overseeing the development of the platform. Okay.
Hi everybody, I'm Sarina Jordan. I've been with Prometheum for almost a year now. My focus is majority on methodology development, but I also assist and support the team in all other things related to the ICS. And my hope for today is that we'll have increased collaboration and community building out of this session.
Hi everyone, I'm Simone Ratnam. I'm from Food and Trees for Africa, also one of the founders with Prometheum Carbon. Yeah, great to see you all.
Hi everyone, my name is Robert Lowe. I'm part of the software development team for the Inclusive Carbon Standard platform. So if there's any feedback from today on what we might improve on the system, I'll be listening in.
Thanks, Robert. If I can call out names as I see them alphabetically on our list, that might help. Also, I'm sorry if I don't pronounce your name correctly, but I think, is it Ji or as the first person on the list? Beijing Ji?
Hello.
Hi, welcome.
Yeah. So hi, I'm Beijing, and I'm from China, and mainly focusing on the international certification, and the main area is like carbon certification. And today just hope have a great learning course.
Thank you. Welcome. Next, I have got Esin Tunali, or is it Tunali Esin?
Hello, this is Esin Tunalı from Ricard. We are verifier company.
Thank you. Welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you and welcome,
Okay.
Essen.
Thank you.
Next, I have got Hava Öztürk.
Hi everyone, I am Hava Öztürk. I am working at Carbon with Essen Tunalı. Thank you for this session.
Thank you. Next is Jackie Pastor. Bueno. Jackie, if you're talking, you are on mute. Or maybe she is having a moment. Okay, we'll come back to Jackie if she comes back. Next, I've got Nicola Palmer.
Hi there, my name is Nikki Palmer. I'm from Carbon Calculated. We have a variety of different members on our team that do different parts of carbon footprinting. So I'm just here to listen in to learn a little bit more about the methodology and pass the information through to my team. So thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. Next is Stefan Winter, who I also know.
Hello. Yeah, Stefan Winter. I'm from TÜV Nord Cert in Germany. I am the head of the certification program for all international greenhouse gas emission reduction standards and schemes. I'd like to learn more about criteria, how to become a validation or verification body under this standard, and also maybe criteria how we can set up our regulations to appoint auditors, experts, and so on, and learn generally more about the standard.
Thanks, Stefan. I see we have a new entrant, Prabhu, who I also know. Prabhu, would you just say who you are, where you're from, and if you have any expectations for the session?
Yeah, good morning, Olivia. So this is Prabhu from EPIC, India. So we are the CDM approved university auditors. So considering this is a new standard, so we'd like to know, so start with the learning and eventually follow it up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see Jackie maybe off mute. Jackie, do you just want to introduce yourself the same and give any expectations you may have?
Hi, Olivia. Can you hear me this time?
Yes, can hear you.
Great. Yes, I do work with Prometheum and two other project developers, and I'm just looking forward to hearing about what the criteria are in terms of getting involved in the auditing side and how we can take that forward.
Perfect. Thanks so much, everybody. We'd really like for this to be a very interactive session. If you have any questions, please feel free to jump in or raise your hand. I can't see hands that are raised, but Simone has said that she will be monitoring the chats. And I think, yeah, feel free to interrupt. Sometimes it's better to have the discussion while the slide is fresh in your mind rather than to come back to it. So yes, no question that can't be asked. I'm going to share my screen again. Let's see. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Welcome again. So just to give you a small outline of where this training fits in, today is the first session in a series of a number of sessions. And the first 3 sessions we're hoping to cover mainly the theory and principles around the inclusive carbon standard, which we'll be calling the ICS, and especially with regards to the principal scope and role of auditors in today's session. The next 2 sessions will look at the auditor's manual that we have available, and also a deep dive into the ICS online platform. The next sessions thereafter will be largely practical sessions, where we really do hope that you will have the time and the inclination to really get involved in the step-by-step processes of how to approve a component methodology, how to validate a project, and how to verify a monitoring report. And all of these actions happen within the ICS platform, which my colleagues will help if there are any challenges or difficulties, but we'll get there. So first off, for today, we're looking at very high-level principles associated with the inclusive carbon standard. I want to give you some information on these various points: the what, the why, the who, the how, the when, and what we're looking at going forward. So to start with the what. Inclusive carbon standard, I think many of you are perhaps familiar with it by now. I do see familiar faces. We are a new carbon program. Our aim is to scale up greenhouse gas reduction and removal projects. While we had started as a carbon program that was meant to only service the South African carbon tax market, we have subsequently expanded our scope and really do hope that we can extend these types of projects and the carbon offsets that come out of them to the broader voluntary market. And our idea and principle is to reduce the complexity, the time, the effort, and the cost associated with making a carbon credit project and making a carbon credit. And we want to do this through a variety of different means and mechanisms, including use of technology, streamlining processes wherever possible, without losing integrity of the final outcome, which is a quality project that is registered with the program and a quality carbon credit that is issued by that project and by the program. We could talk a lot about what a quality credit means, and I think just very briefly, a quality credit and a project perhaps is a project or credit that is real, that the emission reduction or removal has actually happened, that it is accurately happened, that the processes for accounting for that emission removal or reduction are transparent, consistent, and are independently assured by the auditing community, which many of you are from. So it's in your contribution to this ecosystem is incredibly important. And without independent auditing, we run the risk that carbon credits that are generated may lack credibility, they may lack quality. So there's an enormous responsibility placed on our system to make sure that we make your lives as easy as possible. The scope of the ICS, the different parties that are involved, and these range from the different types of users who may be project developers and owners. They may be the same or different to people who develop methodologies. There are accredited auditors involved, and there are also general observers, people who may just want to view information, maybe public, maybe interested in affected parties who have comments or just wish to get information related to the types of projects and types of carbon offsets that are generated under the program. In terms of projects, all projects are eligible under the inclusive carbon standard. And what I mean by that is all project types. There is no limitation, for instance, on the types or scale of projects that could be eligible under the ICS. So they can range from small, very, very small PICO to large, but there's no exclusion on project types. What a project does need to do is it needs to demonstrate compliance and alignment with the principles and the rules of the ICS. And we'll go into those a little bit later. Definitely what we want to do is extend the types, the application of these projects and the carbon offsets to the voluntary market internationally. So South African voluntary market, as well as the international market outside of our borders. The structure of the ICS, which some of you may now be familiar with, really there is a good corporate governance component to the ICS. The corporate governance will be handled by a board of trustees who are independent from the individuals and the governance structures that are responsible, for instance, for the approval of component methodologies, the approval of projects, the approval of carbon offsets. And we believe quite fundamentally in separating these powers, because we think that it mitigates the risk that there's a conflict of interest. So operationally wise, the ICS will really be managed by our secretariat, who will function as an administrative role and will liaise between the board of trustees with our other governance structures like our environmental integrity committee, our technical subcommittee, and also the users of the system, whether that is the methodology developers, the project owners, the auditors such as yourselves. And all those interactions happen on the ICS platform. That is the ecosystem in which all of our actions take place, really. Importantly, while we are aiming to expedite the amount of time that it takes to develop a project and a carbon credit and to simplify the processes, we are looking to align with best practices in terms of ensuring that there's environmental integrity associated with the carbon credits that are issued from this program. And we are aligning with ICROA, with the eligibility criteria for CORSIA, as well as the ICVCM's core carbon principles. And the international best practices really has a number of core elements, which are described briefly on the right-hand side of this slide. And I'm sure most of you are probably well familiar with these concepts. And the important principles that the ICS aligns with are obviously that while any project type is additional, it must demonstrate that it is additional. So any project type is eligible, it must demonstrate that it is additional. And we draw very heavily on the well-established definitions of additionality, which is to say that your project needs to demonstrate that it would not have happened if there weren't this incentive of a carbon market to make that project happen. And there are some commonly accepted ways and means of demonstrating additionality, and that we'd like to leverage on what is acceptable and best practice, considering the work that has been undertaken in the kind of existing carbon programs and legacy carbon programs that we're familiar with in this regard. We need to know that there is sufficient information on the type of activity that is being undertaken in the project, whether it's a mitigation activity related to emission reductions or removals. There needs to be enough information that you can replicate or fully understand how the eventual emission reductions or removals are calculated. There needs to be a realistic and credible baseline. Very, very importantly, there needs to be transparency and accuracy with regards to the way in which the emissions reductions or removals are quantified, reported and verified. There needs to be permanence with regards to land-based projects. We need to have adhere to the principles of no double counting. This is particularly important when you consider that there is much there are many programs related to environmental attributes of certain project activities, whether they are renewable energy certificates that could potentially claim the same environmental attribute. There is international systems, carbon systems coming in place where we absolutely have to ensure that there's no double counting of these carbon offsets. We have to have clear governance structures within the program. There has to be a registry with a clear and transparent chain of custody. There have to be safeguards, and these include principles related to do no significant harm, and also the Cancun safeguards when it comes to land-based projects and RED projects. just a little bit about the type of safeguards, which as an auditing community that we would expect that you would be required to consider within the scope of your audits. There, in the standard, there is a framework for a do no significant harm risk assessment. And some of you may be familiar with this concept, and it comes from the EU's green taxonomy. And really it says that you have to perform this type of risk assessment and demonstrate that your project does not result in significant harm. And some of the steps involved in that assessment are looking at the boundary of your do no significant harm risk assessment. You have to identify the potential impacts that a project may have. The project developers have to assess the significance. They have to develop mitigation measures to address those impacts that are significant. They have to know if there's any residual risk that results after they've put in the mitigation measures. There must be a management plan, there must be stakeholder consultation, and there must be a way in which these things are reported. Importantly, the land-based projects need to consider the Cancun safeguards. And many of those are also related to stakeholder consultations, but they're also protecting the rights of indigenous people and landowners, and making sure that there's requirements for permanence in terms of these land-based projects and many others. An important part of the inclusive carbon standard is the availability of information to the public. We would like as much as our information that can be made publicly available to be so. And these include having a carbon standard, which is available on the website. I'll give you the URL a little bit later. We've got various manuals, including methodology manual for project developers who want to develop methodologies, procedures manual, and auditor manual as well, which will be the subject of our next workshop coming on Thursday this week. And we've also got the terms of reference for the various governing bodies and structures, minutes of meetings, methodologies that are in development or will be available for public comment, projects that want to be registered, projects that want to issue carbon credits. These will all be made available for public comment, and also the records of the credits that are issued. Now we come into the more kind of interesting part of what sets the ICS apart from legacy carbon programs and standards. So the ways in which we want to achieve our objectives, which is to scale up the amount of projects that are of a high quality, is to apply a bit of new thinking when it comes to developing projects and obviously the assurance or the auditing of projects. One of which is the use of very simplified methodologies. In our experience as assisting project developers with the registration and verification of projects, one of the biggest hurdles is navigating very complex, lengthy methodology documents. And in the past, many of these methodology documents have been consolidated. It was supposed to make them more accessible to a wider range of projects, a wider range of project developers. The result is that you can have some methodology documents that are 80 pages long and that have very little relevance to your specific project that you may wish to be developing because their scope is so enormous. What we want to do is fundamentally simplify methodologies so that they are very bespoke, very tailor-made, very specific to certain project activities. Because we think that if you can simplify the rules for which you develop a carbon project and against which the carbon credits are issued, it reduces the amount of time that it takes to develop the project. It reduces the complexity. It reduces the amount of effort that is involved. And all of this can reduce the auditing burden as well. The end goal is to make more projects that are quicker and simpler and cheaper to develop. one of the other ways in which we hope to achieve that goal is to automate the documentation process wherever this is possible. So when we run through the structure of the ICS platform, you will see that information is relating to methodologies and relating to projects, whether it's a project report or a monitoring report. All of that information is uploaded on the platform. And the documents themselves, the project report and the monitoring reports, are automatically generated by the system. And what we aim to do is provide for specific fields in which project developers, methodology developers, or the appointed representatives put in the information that is very specifically required in fields. So there's less of a chance that you can put in information that's not relevant or not correct, because the fields are so specific to what is being asked for. So we do expect that will decrease the complexity and the time and the effort required to make these project documents associated with the carbon program. Also, where possible, we hope to automate the collection of data. And we think that this is really high time that this kind of functionality can be incorporated into carbon programs, especially as we have increasing numbers of smart technology, smart meters, things that are connected to the Internet of Things. This type of technology can save time in terms of manually creating data sets, manually cleaning up data sets. Stefan, I see you have a hand. I actually do see hands. That's amazing. Will you jump in?
Yes. Just came to my mind is who would develop such kind of simplified methodologies? Is this you, ICS? Because if I think about like UNFCCC and CDM, always the project developer did develop mainly these methodologies and came up with it with their project activity. And then there was a lengthy process of validating the methodologies and to get it registered and so on. And it took ages to get the project started and kick off. Yeah. And the other thing is what would happen if a project developer found that there is no methodology for his case?
Very, very, very good questions. And we'll come to them in more detail. But essentially, there is a top-down and bottom-up approach as well to developing methodologies. The ICS can develop methodologies, but it's also project developers can develop methodologies. And you're absolutely right. If there is not an approved methodology for a project, that project needs to have a methodology developed before it can be registered with the program. But I'm going to come to that in quite a lot more detail. So if you can just hang on there.
Okay.
But the idea is that the processes to approve a methodology should be expedited, should be shortened, because we have the requirement for very simple component methodologies, the requirement to use the ICS platform as a tool in which to develop these methodologies where various inputs are allowed for on the platform itself. And we will come to the approval process of those methodologies shortly. But coming back to the collection of data on an automated basis, that's absolutely key and a novel feature of the ICS. It doesn't mean, though, that it can be applied to all projects. You just can't yet, I think, digitalize the verification and reporting of all types of projects. And so obviously there will be the provision to allow for manually inputted data like you would have in a traditional project development approach, where there are spreadsheets, and those will have to go through the more kind of rigorous auditing and assurance processes, because they do allow for the human error. As such, they have the potential to lack the quality and perhaps the integrity that an IoT meter might have. Also importantly, and one of the elements that we'll discuss in a bit more detail, is the novel concept of landmark values or projects. And I'll come into a little more detail on that as we carry on. Just to go into more details of these component methodologies that Stefan was asking about, you know, the basis is to know what they entail. So the ICS principles are that component methodologies should be very short, should be very specific to the relevant components that you might be used to seeing in a, we call them normal project design document, project description, or a monitoring report. When you look at those suite of documents, and if we take a project description or project design document, for example, you will see these different types of components contained within that report. There is a section where you have the project details. That's what is the project about? Is it a renewable energy project? Is it a land-based project? Where is it? Who owns it? How is it going to make a carbon offset? How does it reduce emissions or remove emissions? What are the safeguards that have been applied to that type of project? What are the impacts of it? And so that's a very typical first component of any project design document or description that you will look at. Often the next discussion is on additionality. In those documents, there's always a section on how do you demonstrate additionality? What type of approach have you used? Similarly, in terms of the baseline, what is your baseline? How did you establish it? All those questions. And then next come the monitoring related sections, which are the formulas and the inputs and sometimes even the outputs that you expect in a monitoring section. For land-based projects, there would be a permanent section, and tagging is a fairly new component. But by and large, all those top 5, from project details to permanence, these are the standard components that you'd find of any carbon report, whether it's a project description or a monitoring report. What we want are methodologies that speak very specifically to those sections. So instead of having a consolidated methodology that will contain additionality, baseline, monitoring, permanence, those kind of things, we want to have very bespoke carbon component methodologies. Tagging is an exciting new component. And this is, it's not so new, but it allows for the independent assurance of different types of information that you might want in a carbon project. For instance, you might want to have a section in your carbon project that says, my project we think is definitely eligible for COSIA, different markets, for the South African carbon tax market, things like that. It's not enough for a project developer to just say those things. It is often beneficial and to the project developer's advantage if that statement can be independently assured by someone from the auditing community. But to do that, there needs to be a component methodology against which you can audit such a statement. And that's what we're looking for in terms of tagging for markets. You could also tag for co-benefits. And this is a very popular sort of tag, whether it is for increasing biodiversity or gender equality, or for human rights in some way, or reducing poverty, whatever kind of socio sustainable development impact that your project results in, you can now tag it with that particular impact. But again, there needs to be a very short, a very concise, clear component methodology that speaks to how you do that. Or if you are looking at improving biodiversity, how are you going to prove that? Is it going to be based on species surveys, other types of things? Those are the type of things we're looking at. And also, increasingly importantly, is the requirement, especially on the African continent, to demonstrate that your project is providing a share of proceeds back to communities. So that's another type of tagging that we envisage under the ICS. So importantly, all projects have to use a project details component methodology, an additionality component methodology, baseline, and monitoring component methodology. For carbon removal projects, they also need to use a permanence component methodology. Projects are free to use tagging methodologies or not. It is really a very voluntary application. Just to talk a little bit briefly about the difference in terms of the methodological approach applied by the ICS and the approach applied by legacy or traditional programs. I have mentioned these points already, but I do think it is worth highlighting again. The idea behind the component methodologies in the Inclusive Carbon Standard is that they are very specific, very tailor-made to the different types of components that you would find in the carbon reports. Legacy programs and the methodologies under traditional carbon programs, they tend to be huge and monolithic in nature. We want to avoid that because those are overly complex, they're overly onerous, they take a lot of time and effort. We definitely want under the ICS methodologies that are targeted because we really think that this will reduce the time and effort to develop these methodologies and to apply them to a project developer's project. Again, in terms of the development of project documentation under the ICS, what we're aiming to do is streamline the process for the development of these different types of projects. And we believe that the application of generating these documents on the ICS platform will reduce a lot of time, complexity, and effort. Wherever there is time, complexity, effort reduced on behalf of the project developer, we really think that that should extend directly in some sort of way to the auditing scope. If there's a reduced amount of time and effort in the auditing scope, we do hope that this can lead to many more projects being registered. And that's the aim of the ICS. So this slide, I wanted to talk a little bit more in depth on the use of landmark projects and values, because this really is a very new, innovative approach that's used in the ICS. And what it is based on is it's based on the principles of legal precedent. In most legal systems, if you have a principle that is established in one court case, and it is approved in a court case by a judge or a jury or magistrate or whatever it is that the authority is in approving that principle, it means then that that principle can be used in subsequent court cases, that the inputs don't necessarily need to be revisited because they have been so well established in a certain case that they can be used going forward in similar situations. So we're proposing to apply a similar technique in the use of landmark values. For example, if a landmark value is audited in a project scenario and it is approved as the use of a landmark value by the ICS, then that value should be able to be used by project developers in the development of their projects within the time frame that is stipulated, which is applied to that landmark value. For example, landmark values could be related to a grid emission factor. They can be related to other baseline factors, like a biomass baseline for cook stoves. They could be related to technology penetration rates. If somebody has done the work to establish those values and they have been audited, they should be eligible for use for a certain time going forward. And we think that that was really a key measure in expediting project development and carbon credit verifications. The stipulation of what is a landmark value, that does need to be stipulated in the monitoring methodology that's related to the development of that particular landmark value. So that brings us to the next part of the slides, which is the why are we doing this? And we do think that it's very important to go over this again, because it really frames what we are trying to achieve under the Inclusive Carbon Standard. We really are trying to remove the barriers to the development of carbon projects and the generation of these offsets. And if we think of our legacy systems, these include the Clean Development Mechanism, the Verified Carbon Standard, and the Gold Standard, among others. While there's been enormous work and development in those carbon programs, for developing countries like South Africa, the costs are a huge barrier to entry into those particular programs. They've got incredibly long timeframes. Just in terms of the costs, the effort that's required to make a project design document or a project description or a monitoring report, the effort can be extremely high. And that is a factor of, number one, overly complex methodologies, and number two, some very, very bureaucratic processes and requirements required by these different carbon programs. For instance, these carbon programs tend to change their templates for these types of reports on what appears to be an ongoing forever basis. And this can take a lot of time and effort to make sure that you're using the correct template, that you're applying the rules as they are required, because they keep changing. So that is a real barrier that we are trying to overcome with a system that allows for the automatic generation of these documents. You don't then have to worry about template change. That shouldn't be a feature of a project developer's life. And it shouldn't be something that auditors need to check either, because it won't be an issue. We're talking about auditors, and I know many of you are from that community. We find you very expensive in a developing country context. And we understand why you need to be expensive. We understand that the onboarding and the eligibility requirements and compliance requirements from the carbon standards and programs are onerous. So you need to pass down that time and effort and cost onto project developers. It's well understood, but we're also operating in developing country contexts where we need to now pay you in dollars or rands, which are hugely unfavorable to project developers. So we are hoping that if we have a local carbon standard, these costs can be reduced in many respects, because the scope of auditing can be reduced, because the requirements that you need to join the ICS are reduced. This is the hope and the dream. Obviously, that's no way that we can prescribe these types of requirements, but we do hope that the scale of projects can warrant that at a future stage. There are also very high issuance costs associated with these legacy carbon programs. Again, they're dollar-based, and a lot of that is very detrimental to project developers. Yes, again, on the timeframes, the whole process takes a long time. It takes an even longer time if you are a small project developer trying to do a land-based project. We see that that's a huge barrier. And we are trying very much to reduce those types of barriers under the ICS. We think that there's definitely a scope and rationale for a new carbon program or standard. We think that the legacy programs have tried very, very hard to make sure that there is no carbon project or carbon credit that is included that should not have been included. And I think that that's a very noble aim. But the reality is that it's caused a lot of high quality, credible, accurate, real carbon projects to be excluded from accessing the carbon finances that can come from registering a project with a carbon program. What we need is more of a balance. Certainly, I don't think anybody is suggesting that any project of any nature, without any safeguards, without any rules, be included in carbon programs. But we do think that at the ICS, what we want to make sure is that this risk of erroneously excluding a project is balanced with the risk of erroneously, just to make sure that there's a balanced approach, that this type of approach is absolutely necessary to making sure that we reach the goals of the Paris Agreement. It's not possible to quantify the impacts of projects that have not been allowed access to carbon finances for when they join a carbon program. But in our own limited experience, we can tell you that it's high, that we are not getting the types of projects that we need to reduce average temperatures globally, and that we definitely need to do something about that. And again, this slide really goes to say again what we are trying to do. We are trying to balance the auditing burdens associated with the issuance of carbon credits with the auditing burdens that are placed on the entities that are using these carbon credits. So by way of example, and I use the South African carbon tax system as an example, and I think it fits pretty well. In the South African system, if you are a taxpayer for carbon tax, the first thing that you need to do is you need to report your emissions to the Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries. And you do this through reporting on the South African greenhouse gas emission reporting system. And as a tax-paying entity, let's say I'm a big emitter, I upload my emissions information, which is a very small carbon footprint, if you like, on a very, very small determined boundary of direct emissions. I upload that onto the SAGES system, and the department has a look at my emissions, and if they have any queries, they can then ask me as the entity that uploaded this information to undergo a verification process. This is really at the discretion of the department, and is not something that any tax-paying entity has to do without a request from the department, which we find is a very imbalanced approach if you consider that any carbon offset applicable under the South African carbon tax has had to be audited at a very, very high level. So what we are trying to do is to balance these auditing approaches. And what we're aiming to do is really get to a level at which there can be reduced time, effort, and costs associated with the development of these carbon projects and these carbon offsets. What we have in this slide is a graphic, a bar chart on the right-hand side, and it's for indicative purposes only. It is also our wish list. If we consider the time and effort and money that it takes to register a carbon program and get the carbon credits out of that, these are the red bars in terms of the legacy programs. We think that at the moment, methodology development may be on a par initially in terms of the time and effort required. We think that the actual development of the project design document or project description or project report, as we would like to call it, we think that there can be huge savings in time, effort, and cost associated with developing those project design documents. Validation audits, those are important. at the moment, we envisage that their scope, time, effort, cost should be on a par with legacy programs, because that's the basis and the foundation from which you proceed. Thereafter, in terms of the drafting of monitoring reports, in terms of the verification audits, we do think that there should be reduced time and effort. And this could be as a direct result of the mechanisms and tools that are provided for under the Inclusive Carbon Standard. And that's the simplified component methodologies. That's the automated documentation development process, the automation of data collection and emission reduction or removal calculations within the system where that is possible, where there's an IoT device or a smart meter or something to that effect. The use of landmark values. We do think that all of those will enable this reduced amount of time, work, effort, money required, ultimately in the generation of carbon offsets. Very, very quickly, just who are the various players within the Inclusive Carbon Standard? By way of background, Simone is introduced herself from Food and Trees for Africa. Promethium as well. We've been involved in the development of the ICS since 2017. Where we are now is at the launching stage of this program, and we have set in place an environmental integrity committee. There have been a number of meetings thus far this year. In total, I think there may have been 4 or 5. There will be an annual general meeting of members, which is related to the governance, corporate governance of the ICS. These are some of the members of our Environmental Integrity Committee, and they're also supported by a technical subcommittee. What we want to be focusing on in the near future is getting approvals and acceptance by various recognized programs and platforms. These include the ICVCM, and in particular, their core carbon principles. We want to align with those and have started the registration process. We eventually would like to be accredited under CORSIA, and obviously under the South African carbon tax system as well. At the moment we are allowed to apply for the South African carbon tax system, we will do so. We understand that government is imminently publishing the framework by which candidate standards will be approved. And as soon as that is published, we can then apply. So I think I'd like to take a pause. If there are any questions or queries or comments before we get into the how, which is Stefan's questions of how do you get a methodology approved? How do you get a project approved, monitoring report approved, etc. So does anybody have any comments at the moment?
I don't see any in the chat.
Okay. Can I make a suggestion that we just have a 5-minute break, and that we return 5 minutes from here? My time is nearly 2 o'clock in South Africa, so 5 minutes. How is that? Okay, great. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Olivia.
All right, I think we can continue. Unless there is any very strong feelings against that you need some more time, but perhaps we can proceed.
All good.
Thanks, Simone. So now perhaps to get into some of the details about exactly how we envisage that the auditing processes and requirements will work under the inclusive carbon standard. Importantly, the first step is to know that everything happens on the ICS platform. And the platform is an open source technology stack. It is hosted in the cloud on the Ubuntu server. We use a mathematical solver in order to run calculations where these are required, where there is the automation of data collection and emission reduction or removal calculations. And that solver, the name of it is AMPL. There's also a MySQL database that is used to store and archive the information related to companies, related to the different users, whether they are individuals, whether they're auditors or project owners or interested parties, those kind of things. The other types of information that we would store on the database is related to methodologies. And then obviously the information related to project related information. And that can range from project reports, monitoring reports, and issued credits. Importantly, we are in discussions with a third-party registry to handle the trading of credits, because that is something outside of our scope and best left to the professionals. But within this technology system, there are obviously the different types of users that can participate. And these range from entities like many of yourselves who are involved in auditing, can range from project developers, the governance committee members who are part of the inclusive carbon standard, the secretariat, and any other appointed representatives who may be appointed by project developers or methodology developers. And they interface in terms of the system on a user interface. And there are also project-related information that can be applied to the system. And what I mean by that, I mean the electronic data that comes from smart meters or in meters connected to the Internet of Things. And there's also provision for that within the system so that they can speak to each other and exchange the necessary types of information that are needed to make sure that the data sets can be accessed and that calculations can be run on those different data sets. So what does it take to make a methodology? If we look at a life cycle, high-level approach to developing a methodology, you can see that there are a number of different role players that are required, and those are the dark blue blocks on the left-hand side of this slide. And each of these players, if I can call it that, if they have different responsibilities along the methodology development life cycle. So if we go through it one by one. So the first step in all of this, as Stefan rightly pointed out, is to have valid methodologies that are available for use by project developers. So step one is a methodology developer or owner needs to develop a component methodology. And they do this by inputting the various requirements and fields on the ICS platform. Once the methodology is suitably developed, the methodology owner can then submit that component methodology for approval. The approval process is really divided into two types of categories. I guess you can have a simplified or expedited approval process. And this would be when the Environmental Integrity Committee decides that they have the skills, the capacity, and the time to approve a certain component methodology. And we think this is perfectly acceptable. Some methodologies are going to be much simpler than others. For instance, a project details component methodology could be much more simpler than a monitoring methodology for cook stoves, or a tagging methodology may not need extensive skills and capacities that are not contained within our Environmental Integrity Committee or the technical subcommittee that supports that Environmental Integrity Committee. So if they decide that they are not well enough equipped to do the approval of that particular component methodology, they will then recommend that it goes for the audit route. And that's when the methodology owner will appoint an accredited auditor, such as yourselves, to handle the audit. Just a note, concurrently to this process, the draft component methodology will be published by the ICS Secretariat for comment. This is the usual process where comment from anybody in the world is elicited on this particular document. And the way in which it will be done is through a public commenting platform on the ICS platform itself. So if we just take a step back, if the Environmental Integrity Committee believes that they are well equipped enough to undertake the approval process themselves, they will review the component methodology and make a recommendation. If an auditor needs to be involved, an auditor will follow a similar process where they will audit the new component methodology, and they will submit a recommendation to the Environmental Integrity Committee. The Environmental Integrity Committee is the highest decision-making body in the ICS. The Environmental Integrity Committee will have the authority to approve or reject a component methodology. And obviously this component methodology must take due care and response to any comments that are received during the public commenting period, which is 30 days. Let's say that all comments have been addressed, all auditing findings are closed out, and the component methodology is then ready for publication. The Secretariat will publish and activate the component methodology on the ICS, which will mean that project developers or owners will now have the ability to use that component methodology in the development of their carbon project. What's quite nice, if you are a methodology developer and your methodology is approved, there is a sliding scale of suggested royalties that can accrue to people who develop methodologies. And we really do hope that this can be an incentive to develop the required component methodologies to scale the types of projects that can be registered and issued on the system. So in terms of a project life cycle, it does mirror the usual carbon offset life cycle that many of you may be well acquainted with. But essentially what happens is that a project developer employs a certain methodology. In this instance, it would be a suite of component methodology. They generate a project report because every methodology that they select has related inputs on the ICS platform or fields. So if they select a cook stove project, that cook stove a project and the component methodologies will have prescribed fields in which they need to input information when on the ICS platform. The end result is a project report that gets developed. And that is the type of report then that will need to be audited by an accredited auditor. The auditor then goes through the usual auditing process, and the final result, hopefully for approval, is then confirmed or rejected by the Environmental Integrity Committee. And that's the project validation cycle, the one that I think that most of our auditing community will be well familiar with. What you don't see there, but is included, is scope for public consultation on the project report, which is another name for a project description or project details, project design document, and that would be made public for public commenting for 30 days. Again, all comments would need to be addressed before the project can actually be approved and registered on the standard. In terms of verification, projects will undergo verification once they're operational, and the usual process will follow. So if the project entails automatically collected data sets, maybe that's a little bit easier and quicker to do. And that's certainly our aim and our desire, is that during the operation of the project, data will be pulled through automatically from these smart devices. If that's not the type of project that is being audited, there will be manually captured data in the form of spreadsheets and the usual types of information. The project owner or developer will be responsible for completing all the fields in the monitoring report template that is on the ICS platform. Once that is complete or ready to go for audit, it will be submitted to the auditor that is appointed by the project owner, and the auditor will undertake the usual verification audit tasks. Once that is complete, the recommendations by the auditor then get approved or rejected again by the Environmental Integrity Committee, which is the highest governing body in terms of project registration and issuance. Once happy, then the inclusive carbon credits are issued on the ICS platform by the Secretariat, and the project owner will receive their carbon credits. So what can you guys do? What do you need to provide in order to be an accredited auditor under the ICS? Well, we very much would like you to be accredited with a body that's affiliated with the IAF, that's the International Accreditation Forum, in terms of ISO 14065. Or alternatively, if you have gone through the pain and burden and process of registering as an auditor with either the VCS, the CDM, or the gold standard, we will accept that as well. Ideally, our initial concept was just to have accreditation in terms of ISO 14065, but it turns out that is a little bit limiting. Hence, we have extended the eligibility to auditors who are registered under one of those three well-recognized carbon programs. Also importantly, auditors must complete a training program such as this, a suite of our programs, which outline the various principles of the ICS and also give you a very good understanding of how to use the ICS platform, because we realize that is quite a new aspect that may take a little time and effort in terms of getting well acquainted with. Obviously, as auditors, you need to provide evidence of your sectoral competency. And we will need to know that if you wish to be auditors of land-based projects, well, then obviously you must have the required skills and competencies.
Olivia,
I think, yes.
I have a hand from
Yes,
Stefan.
please, Stefan.
Yeah, me again.
Yes.
More question. First question, you would would you also in future then accept an accreditation under A64 mechanism? Because CDM will see it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Sorry, when we talk of CDM,
Yeah,
yes, by
same,
extension,
yeah, okay.
same.
And then for the account, there is written, also we as accredited auditors would also be users and have access to this registry database.
Mm.
So would this be on individual basis or on entity basis, like TÜV Nord-Cert as an entity has an access and one account access, for example, or is this then to each auditor who needs an account?
Yes. We do envisage it at the entity level, but you can have multiple users
Okay.
within your entity, and you can also prescribe rights to them. Maybe, yeah, maybe some of them should just be able to view, and maybe some of them should be able to view and make changes in the platform.
Okay. And one more question is then, considering we have done our work, we assessed either methodology or a project, and do we need to upload the final package, or do we send it to the client and they upload it? Because it's in some.
I cannot understand that. Yes, that process is absolutely bizarre to me. I know what you're talking about. Actually, everything happens on the ICS. So you, as the auditor, you upload your final verification or validation report. You don't give it to a project developer to submit to somebody. I can't understand that.
Me neither. Okay.
So no.
Cool. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Welcome. So what the general responsibilities and obligations that we envisage. We envisage that auditors who want to participate in this program, you will comply with the requirements for approvals of component methodologies and validation or verification of projects and carbon credits, respectively. We expect the usual minimum standards that you will behave in a professional and ethical way. We expect that the report should accurately reflect the results of the audit. We do hope that you can contribute to the ongoing professional development in this field of accounting for carbon credits and auditing. We expect that there should be compliance with the accreditation requirements, whether that is IAF ISO 14065 or whether it is proof that you have been registered with one of the recognized carbon programs, CDM and Article 6.4 being interchangeable. And we do expect that there will be renewals of that accreditation at regular intervals, just to make sure that the information stays up to date and that the accreditations and sectoral competencies are up to date. And we do expect that there would be a level of cooperation with the administrative requirements that are required by the standard, and whether that's with the Secretariat or with the Environmental Integrity Committee or their technical subcommittee during the audit process. Those are the kind of expectations that we would have. But in terms of actually how to start this process, the first thing that we'd like you to do, please, is to register on the ICS platform. And there's a link here. Maybe Simone, if we can put that in the chat as well, maybe people can even log on while I am talking. Please do so. That's the first step. And we strongly encourage you to start getting familiar with the platform. It's in a state of development. You will find bugs. Please let us know. We have been testing, but it just seems that there is never enough testing of every single feature for every different possible application of it. We would absolutely love to hear from you if you have any suggestions for improvement, whether it's usability, whether something is not working like the way you expected it to. Please do let us know. And this is the start of the process. Every entity, auditing entity, will need to have an account under which you have to provide various pieces of information. And this will include the registration of your designated auditors. So the types of information that we will need, we'll need a company ownership. What kind of services do you offer? What kind of sectoral scopes can you provide auditing and assurance services on? Who are the people? Is it going to be Stefan and XYZ? Who are these people? And what are their accreditations and their qualifications and their experience? And yes, please, evidence of accreditation with the IAF or the other various standards. And there will be a review process. The Secretariat will review your accompanying documents and will revert if there are any questions. So there are a couple of different roles for auditor personnel. They're different functionalities on the ICS platform. Somebody who is authorized as an accredited auditor can review project implementation and monitoring reports. It can be the person who is the primary point of contact with the members of the ICS, whether that's the Secretariat or whether it is our technical subcommittee or the Environmental Integrity Committee as well. They can be an initiator from the auditor's side. That is somebody who can initiate the audit process. They can view the relevant component methodologies. They can add or remove auditors. So that's almost like the administrative person on behalf of the auditing company. They can upload information. They can sign off on project activities or validate cancellation letters. There can be an accredited auditor authorizer. So these individuals could authorize changes to your company-specific information. They can view the component methodologies in which you are involved in auditing and which are active, and they can sign off project verification audits. There can also be an auditor observer if this is at all necessary. And these are people from within your organization that can view the component methodologies and the various reports that you are working on when they are active, but they don't have the rights to upload documentation. They don't have the right to approve a component methodology approval or project validation or a carbon credit issuance. So they may just be an administrative function as you see fit. A couple points here are on the things that we would like auditors to focus on in terms of their assurances and in terms of their reviews. When considering a new component methodology, there's the requirement to make sure that this is not a duplication of a component methodology that already exists. We would like you to consider the validity and suitability of the applicability criteria for each component methodology. Each one will have a number of applicability criteria, and it's very important then that these are well suited to the type of component methodology that is in the process of approval. There will be a discussion on the complementarity or the compatibility and dependency with other component methodologies, and these are discussions that will happen with the ICS personnel as well, whether it's from the Secretariat or possibly from the Environmental Integrity Committee and the Technical Subcommittee. This is because you can't have a monitoring component methodology that's for a land-based project and then have a baseline component methodology that's related to the grid emission factor. there does have to be a mutual agreement on the types of component methodologies that are compatible with each other. At the end of the day, it is the responsibility of the standard to make sure that that compatible methodologies are so marked within the system so that you don't get a project developer who has a baseline component methodology stipulating how to calculate a grid emission factor, and they're actually doing a emission removal project. So, but those are the types of things that we are asking you to look out for. There will be specific criteria in our methodology manual, which will also make reference to the use of example projects when auditing a component methodology. And we'll touch on that quite in depth in the next training session when we go through the components of the methodology manual. But we do also expect auditors to understand the emission reduction calculations as they are inputted into the system, which we'll go through in various practical sections. We'll expect auditors to consider these formulae for their correctness and also for their completeness in terms of calculating emission reductions or removals. In terms of project validations, we will expect auditors to know that the different component methodologies are complementary and in compliance with each other. We will expect auditors to make sure that the provisions of those component methodologies are reflected in the project reports that come out. And the assessment of any relevant supporting documentation. Similarly with the monitoring reports. Obviously where there's a connection to a smart meter or a device that's connected to the Internet of Things, there will be extra requirements to ensure that those pieces of equipment are assured to be working and calibrated as required. But all of this information gets uploaded and discussed on the platform. And then obviously where projects don't have automated data collection, where they have manually captured data, also those pieces of information will be uploaded onto the system as well, and any supporting documents associated with them. Example projects are an important feature in terms of projects that are being validated. Project developers need to produce an example project that illustrates how their project complies with the methodology that they're wishing to approve. So it can contain fictitious information, or it contain a real information that is really at the discretion of the project developer. The idea is that you have something practical to test when you are validating and approving a component methodology. By way of example of the steps that would be undertaken by a project developer in order to develop a component methodology, the project owner will, in order to develop an example project, the project developer will first select a suite of approved component methodologies according to the different categories of component methodologies. So you'll see that there will be the component methodologies under the project details, under additionality, under baseline, under monitoring, tagging, as well as its own separate kind of category. But the component methodologies that are selected by the project owner, they have got to be compatible with each other. So we can see that in this example, the ones that are highlighted in green, these are the potential suite of compatible methodologies that a project owner can select. to have an approved project, a project owner will need to have at least one component methodology from project details, additionality, baseline, monitoring, and also permanence if that is a land-based project. It's totally optional to have tagging methodologies, and these don't really have a compatibility component to them. It's possible that they can be cross-cutting across different types of projects, so compatibility is not really an issue there. But once these different component methodologies are selected, then the project developer completes the required inputs that come up from the ICS platform report template that is automatically generated. This information is quite a manual process. It will require inputs from the project developer. Where is the location? Where is the, who is the owner? What kind of methods are used to demonstrate additionality? They'll be able to also provide any supporting documents during this process as well. The end result is a report, a project report that is automatically generated by the system. The requirements for auditing in this regard are to determine where there are landmark values that are applied, whether the component methodologies are indeed compatible with each other, and whether the information that is provided by the project developers is accurate, transparent, correct, all of those sorts of usual auditing requirements. If we consider the auditing requirements that might be required for a monitoring report, there are a number of steps involved in that process as well. First of all, it assumes that the project has already been validated. It assumes that there were approved component methodologies and that the project is actually now in operation. What you do have once the project is in operation is a set of data sets, activity data sets. These can be automatically collected by the system through the use of smart meters, Internet of Things, those types of things, or they can be manual entries of data sets, as we maybe more commonly have experience with. And those can be in the form of Excel spreadsheets, for example. So all of these pieces of data sets are uploaded into the ICS platform. In the case of automatically collected data sets, the actual calculations can be run within the system, and they can provide the results of those calculations. If it's manually inputted data, you will probably have an Excel spreadsheet which will have the usual linked inputs and outputs where the calculations are provided for in that spreadsheet. The end result is a monitoring report, which is then provided for auditing. The auditing requirements in this regard are to know whether the data sets come from manual uploads like spreadsheets, or whether they are coming from the IoT devices. And importantly, like any meter in a project scenario, calibrations need to be valid. There must be assurance that the connection with this meter is secure, and possibly what an auditor may wish to do is do a spot check of data sets. And this process could be quite different from the approach to assuring or auditing a manually entered monitored data sets, where there may need to be a more thorough assessment, more thorough spot checks, more thorough interrogation of the inputs and the actual calculations that are run, and then the outputs that are generated. So just to start getting you acquainted with what you can expect when you log onto the ICS platform, and what types of views you're going to start to see, and what type of information and functionality you can expect. So the next number of slides will give you a high level idea of what you can expect in that regard. For example, this slide presupposes that there has been component methodologies that are approved, that the project is now in a state where a project developer is ready to appoint an auditor to undertake the audit. What you can see on your side as an auditor will be a dashboard. So you will be able to see the validations, the verifications, and the component methodology approvals that you are involved in. And you will be able to see these by their IDs in terms of the system. You'll be able to see these in terms of project codes. There will be titles, there'll be project related information, perhaps at a high level, who the project owner is, what the audit status is. And there'll also be these functional buttons that you can see on the slide on the right hand side. These darker green buttons are where you can undertake the actions that you might want to take when you are doing your audits. It will allow you to download documents. It'll allow you to view project information. It'll allow you to make comments in certain documents, in certain sections. So there's lots of functionality that we do hope that you will start exploring to see how well it works, what improvements can be made, if you have questions or queries, and we're also here to help with that. So, for instance, this is a typical type of view you might see when you as an auditor are validating a component methodology. So we can see it in this slide. There are two types of component methodology that you as the auditor are looking at. There is a project details component methodology for emission reduction projects. You're also looking at a component methodology for baselines, and that's for location-based baseline for grid-connected solar thermal renewable energy projects, as an example. And you'll start seeing the different fields that are related to these component methodologies. You'll see that for instance, the project details has got a number of different fields related to applicability criteria, the project description, management structure of the project, crediting period that would need to be inputted, regulatory compliance, all of those kind of things. And on the right-hand side, you will see the results of what you will be able to do. You will be either able to reject or approve these types of fields that are related to this component methodology. And you'll also be able to download all of the methodology details as well. If you were to look at a snapshot of something that you might see in a verification audit, and if we look now at the details of it, what you would have is a monitoring report that is available on the ICS platform. And for every aspect of the monitoring report, there is a provision for you as the auditors to comment, to query, whether to say, can you clarify something? There is a provision for you to say, oh, this is incorrect. Please, can you correct it now or in the future? And these are very much the typical types of actions that you're probably used to making. At this point, they will all be on a section by section basis. Like now we're looking at a monitoring report, which has a review of the safeguards. In this monitoring component methodology, there's a field regarding project ownership and prevention of double counting. So you will have the ability to say, okay, project owner has provided the necessary information that's accurate, transparent, correct, etc. And you can choose to approve or not approve. And this is where you kind of engage with the project developers or their appointed representatives. Here is just a view of project data that you could expect to see. And what we are looking at here is information related to the meters or measuring devices. And so for this particular example, I can see that the piece of equipment is an electricity meter. I can see that it's a smart meter. It's got access to the Internet of Things. You can start to see various pieces of information related to this project at the click of a button. So we can see the serial number. We can see who this piece of equipment was registered by, what parameter it links to. In the calculations, what's the frequency of monitoring? Is it active? Is it not? Other pieces of information related to set elements, what the accuracy range is, what the calibration frequency requirements, tech specs for the meter and the calibration specifications as well. All of these types of pieces of information are and will be available on the platform itself. Again, just some more details of what you can expect to see. If, for instance, the data sets are available and they've come from an IoT device, for instance, you will be able to download that information in a couple of different ways that perhaps is more suitable to what you're looking for. You can download them as Excel spreadsheets. You can download them as graphics. And you can pull various pieces of data out where you can check the data, you can review the inputs, you can review the logs, but you do not have permission to change any of these things. That permission lies only with the project developer, and that should be the process that is finalized before they send this information to you. And the eventual outcome of these types of audits will be an audit report. And hopefully this will reduce some of your time and effort in auditing, because you won't need to check every time that the audit report template is up to date or not, because this is the template. The template is built into the system. And all the comments that you made and resolved, and the decisions that you made relevant, the findings that you came up with, wherever you posted those comments and requirements on the system, they get consolidated into an eventual report. And this is an example of a verification audit report. And you will see that they're different sections. So under general, we can see that there are no comments from the auditor, no general comments. The decision has been approved and there's no requested action. But you can see under description of the baseline scenario, there is a comment. There is a decision that's been rejected. So this document goes back to the project developer, who then has to close out these types of findings. Just another view of what you can expect when you go onto the system. This is an overview of a particular project. We can see the emission reductions to date that are accruing to this project. We can see key details. We can see the project report, which is in essence the project description or project design document. Can download that document, can download the monitoring report. You can access all the data sets from this view. So all of the actual data logs would be available here. On the left-hand side, there's a sort of a summary of the audits that you are involved in. You won't see, obviously, the audits that you're not involved in. That would be a different view for other auditors. yeah, so it's really kind of a highly functional dashboard that we hope that you can use to the benefit of making your life easier. And that's really it from the perspective of a very brief introduction to what the ICS platform will look like from your perspective. We do intend to go through those details much more in depth in practical examples as well. But we do encourage you in the meantime to go ahead, register where you can, poke around, see what you can find as well. And I know that when it does come to the practical session, there will be login details provided for our kind of development app, so that any information or decisions that you make on the system, they won't reflect as live. They'll be on the development side of the system. So I'd really like to just pause a moment there. Are there any questions, comments? Stefan, did we cover the questions that you were interested in terms of the approval process?
Olivia, thanks. Yeah, mainly yes. But I have one or two more.
Yes,
because,
please.
You said that auditors require a training on the ICS rules and requirements. Would ICS provide this training program so anyone had to register and get the participation or to do any kind of small test or exam? Or can we internally set up a system to provide this training?
The idea is that the ICS would provide for it. I'm not sure we had envisaged a test as such, but maybe that's a good idea.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, usually at the end, there are what we do. There are some questions, and not too complex, just to get the feedback if the guys got the main content of it. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I think that's definitely a good idea. Yeah, and the outline and contents for that would be developed by the ICS, but I'm sure it would be a consultative process.
Okay, I also found how to register the company. So because actually now I have registered myself on this via this link.
Yes, as an auditor or as a observer?
I just followed the link, typed in and registered.
Okay.
But then I saw there are 4 methodologies, and one is for open for comments. And when I click on it, then it asks me whether to register as an auditor or not. And then I would need this approval letter or authorization letter from my superiors or so.
I think, and I stand to be corrected, Serena or Philip, there are some the component methodologies that are open for public comment, and like you, me, anybody could comment on them if they wanted. Is that right, Serena or Philip?
Olivia, that is right, but they would have to at the moment register on the ICS platform in order to provide comments.
Okay. So even Stefan, if he doesn't register as an auditor, can he still give comment?
Yes, I think if he registers, but then he would have to probably register as under another rule. Yes, but we can maybe have a look at that.
Okay. Thank you.
So let me see if I have more questions. I guess no, that's it from my side. Thank you.
Okay, great. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on it from the moment. If I can just pick on some people, like Jackie, I know you're coming from a project developer perspective, but do you have any questions thus far on the auditing process? check if Jackie is there. Okay, maybe Jackie is not quite there yet. But yes, Prabhu, for instance, I mean, I pick on you because I know you, known you in the past. If there are any questions in terms of the principles or the process that you have at the moment, please let us know. And if you are talking, you are on mute at the moment. But maybe if there are no questions just yet, I think then let us crack on. Just for the last couple slides of the presentation, which is really a bit of next steps. Where are we going to? And what are the things that we'd like you to look out for? Just in terms of our development timeline, this is a bit of a summary of things that have happened in the past, milestones for us, starting from 2017 all the way up to now, in 2023, where we have launched the Inclusive Carbon Standard in a series of workshops, and are now really looking at refining the platform, making sure that there are approved methodologies for project developers to register their projects with, and making sure that all our governance structures and processes are streamlined and functioning properly. And another view of this process, we are at the moment looking at an intense program of developing methodologies. We really are very excited by this process, and are really looking forward to testing our principles and processes for approvals. Importantly, part of this is developing an auditor community, and this involves obviously training, as we've discussed, on the principles and requirements, and also on how to navigate the platform itself, because that does take a little bit of new skills, which are perhaps not something that the other carbon programs have provided just yet. Obviously, project development is key, and at the same time, we are applying to the ICVCM in terms of their core carbon principles, CORSIA thereafter, and South African government whenever we are practically allowed to do so. A short term, just as I said, again, methodology development and approval processes. Those are very important short-term items for us. We are looking at expanding on the principles and processes related to example projects, landmark projects, and landmark values. And again, these applications to platforms who we really want to get a stamp of approval from. We think that is very important for the integrity of the program, and the projects and the credits that come out of it. So what do we want? We want to build an auditor community. We want to build a project developer community. We are continuing to develop the platform. We are looking to strengthen our governance structures and processes and make sure that they run properly. And we really are dying to know your thoughts. There are a number of our guidance process and standard related documents that are available for your access and for comment. So here is the link. Simone, maybe we can also publish that in the chat if you don't mind, and then people can navigate down to the documents that I think are towards the bottom of that page. Please do give us your comments. We really would like to have sight of them. And then the last slide really is to say that we look forward to seeing you further in the week for the next training session. and that will be on the auditor's manual. And hope to continuing discussions and hope to hear of your thoughts. And I think that's us in terms of time. So stop. Oh no, I'm stop sharing. Just made it in time. Thanks, everybody. Yeah.
Then allow me one more question.
Yes, please.
Sorry.
No.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And especially to make it on point. You did not talk about any costs related to accreditation or the procedure.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
Yes. We hadn't.
There are none.
It's not. Yeah, there are none.
Okay, cool.
Yep. So that's I hope is at least an incentive to help us develop this process. Okay, with that, thank you everybody for your time, and look forward to seeing you on Thursday. Thanks everyone.
Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Simone.
Thanks, Olivia. Bye.
Bye.